Once upon a time, in a small village nestled amidst lush green forests, there lived a young girl named Little Red Riding Hood. She was called so because she always wore a bright red cloak with a large hood, given to her by her loving grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood was known throughout the village for her kindness, curiosity, and her boundless love for her grandmother. One sunny morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother called her over and asked her to take a basket of treats to her grandmother, who lived in a quaint cottage deep within the woods. "Take this basket to your grandmother, dear," she said. "She hasn't been feeling well lately, and these treats will surely bring a smile to her face." The basket was filled with freshly baked goodies, including a cherry pie, a jar of honey, and a bottle of elderflower cordial. Little Red Riding Hood was delighted to be entrusted with such an important task. As she set off into the forest, her mother reminded her to stay on the path and not to dawdle, for the woods could be dangerous. Little Red Riding Hood nodded obediently, eager to reach her grandmother's cottage. The forest was alive with the sounds of birds chirping and squirrels scampering up trees. Little Red Riding Hood hummed a merry tune as she walked, occasionally stopping to pick wildflowers or watch a butterfly flitting by. Suddenly, she heard a deep, rumbling voice behind her. She spun around to see a large, shaggy wolf standing on the path. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood," said the wolf, his eyes gleaming with cunning. "Where are you off to all alone?" Little Red Riding Hood innocently replied, "I am taking a basket of treats to my grandmother, who lives just beyond the woods." The wolf's eyes gleamed with a cunning light. "Ah, what a kind granddaughter you are," he said, licking his lips. "Perhaps you could pick some flowers for your grandmother before you arrive. I'm sure she would appreciate a beautiful bouquet." Little Red Riding Hood thought this was a wonderful idea and wandered off the path into the woods to gather flowers. Unbeknownst to her, the wolf grinned to himself and set off towards the grandmother's cottage. When the wolf arrived at the cottage, he knocked on the door, disguising his voice to sound like Little Red Riding Hood. "It's me, grandmother," he called out. "I've brought you some treats." The grandmother, frail and weak, opened the door, and the wolf swiftly devoured her in one gulp. Then he put on her nightgown and climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. Little Red Riding Hood spent a happy hour picking wildflowers and assembling them into a beautiful bouquet. As she finally made her way back to the path, she noticed the sun had shifted. Hurrying along the trail, she soon reached her grandmother's cottage. She knocked on the door, and a weak, croaking voice bade her to enter. Little Red Riding Hood stepped inside and was startled to see her grandmother in bed, looking very strange indeed. Her eyes were beady, her nose was large and hooked, and her mouth was filled with sharp teeth. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have!" exclaimed Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to see you with, my dear," replied the wolf, disguised as the grandmother. "But come closer, so I can see you better." Little Red Riding Hood took a step forward, frowning in confusion. "Grandmother, what big ears you have," she said. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," the wolf replied, his eyes gleaming. "Now come give your old grandmother a kiss." Little Red Riding Hood leaned forward, and in that moment she noticed the large, sharp teeth. "Grandmother, what big teeth you have!" Little Red Riding Hood cried, finally realizing the truth. With a swift movement, the wolf leaped out of bed and revealed his true form. Little Red Riding Hood screamed and tried to back away, but the wolf lunged forward and swallowed her whole. Satisfied with his meal, the wolf climbed back into bed, his belly round and full. Meanwhile, a passing huntsman heard Little Red Riding Hood's screams and rushed into the cottage. He saw the wolf sleeping in the bed and quickly realized what had happened. The woodsman quickly cut open the wolf's stomach, and out popped Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother, safe and sound. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother embraced, grateful to be alive. The woodsman and Little Red Riding Hood worked together to fill the wolf's stomach with heavy rocks. When the wolf awoke, he felt the weight of the stones and tried to run away, but he could barely move. Stumbling to the riverbank, he collapsed and drowned, putting an end to his wicked ways. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother thanked the huntsman profusely, and the village celebrated his heroic deed. From that day forward, Little Red Riding Hood always stayed on the path and never spoke to strangers in the woods, for she had learned a valuable lesson about the dangers that lurked beyond. And so, the story of Little Red Riding Hood serves as a cautionary tale for children, teaching them to be cautious, listen to their parents' advice, and always stay on the right path in life.